The Verfassungsschutz denied the existence of an interregionally operating Nazi party and declared that, quote, most of the Nazi groups have basically no structure, unquote. The playing down of right-wing organizational ability by the Internal Security Service has a long and dishonorable history and has been rigidly adhered to up to the present time. There is never a mention of the underground Nazi network. The countless statements and massive documentation from anti-fascist researchers, the conclusions of which point overwhelmingly to the existence of a controlling cadre structure, have changed nothing. After a wave of racist and Nazi violence unprecedented in the post-war period, the Verfassungsschutz chief Eckhard Wertebach was still telling the German parliament in 1993, quote, the degree of organization and communication among left-wing extremists and autonomes still remains higher than among right-wing extremists, unquote. Skipping down again, this is how the leaders of the banned front organizations of the GDNF, Frank Hübner of the Deutsche Alternative and Michael Schwierczek of the Nationalist Offensive, direct their followers to form a new structure which political opponents are meant to find, quote, difficult to recognize, unquote. That is one of the reasons why Johnny and Janie can't identify Il Duce. Continuing, the restructuring into controllable subunits is the necessary prerequisite to keeping the extent of fascist organization from public scrutiny. Regular meetings of a supra-organizational kind take place in Germany and are designed to bring the regional leaders of various parts of the secret network together. Among the most important of these national gatherings are the periodical guest weeks held by the Deutsche Kulturgemeinschaft, at which the most influential German and Austrian Nazis sit down together to plan strategy. Consequently, the organizational mesh around the GDNF is only a section, and its leader, Christian Worch, or Worch, W-O-R-C-H, only a section leader in a much bigger Nazi hierarchy. The GDNF is not the party, and he is not the Führer. His function is to keep the GDNF alive and to prescribe that members of banned organizations like the DA and NO follow the guidelines set out above. Strenuous efforts have been observed for the past 2 years to build a werewolf structure with small, mobile groups. Such trained commandos are intended to prepare for the occasion when, quote, our agitational munitions are exchanged for or supplemented by grenades, napalm, and high explosive shells. Or, as Joseph Gollum wrote all the way back in 1939, all this time, arms and ammunition must be begged, borrowed, or stolen, and cached in secret places until the proper moment. Returning again to the Searchlight of August of 1994 and continuing, potential victims are not only active anti-fascists, but all opposition to National Socialism, quote, whoever is badly disposed to us and our nation will be fought, unquote. Organization into cells is an international phenomenon. The sister organizations of the German Anti-Antifa Combat 18 and the Swedish terrorist Vit Motstånd, or VAM, also organize on this basis and send their members as mercenaries to Croatia and South Africa. Yet the building of a paramilitary network is only one objective on the way to preparation for a, quote, race war, unquote. In the foreground stands the committed community from which key positions and opinions in society are to be captured. The writer in Nation on Europa, bear in mind that is the publication that was formed by Per Engdahl at the Malmö International all the way back in 1951. This publication representing an element, not representing, but actually is an element of direct historical and operational continuity from the fascism of the Hitler period to the present. Beginning again, the writer in Nation und Europa, who uses the pseudonym Hartmut Hesse, entreats followers to learn from the methods of the Jesuits. Quote, what such a small order as the Jesuits has achieved demands respect, despite the distasteful nature of its message, unquote. With this, the historical continuity of the Nazis becomes crystal clear. Hitler's SS Führer Heinrich Himmler built his secret organization, quote, on the example of the legendary Jesuit order to which the SS officially was opposed, and copied it even down to the smallest detail, unquote. That quote, by the way, coming from a book that I've used in the past on this program, that book being The Order of the Death's Head by Heinz Hühne. So once again, summing up, note that the German Nazi Party today, and it is actually a Nazi party, is organized along or on a cellular basis. Note that there is an underground organization that connects and coordinates all of these seemingly small and unconnected Nazi parties. It is done specifically to make it, quote, difficult to recognize, unquote. It is done basically to see to it that Johnny or Janie cannot identify Il Duce or Der Fuhrer. Note also the collaboration between the Verfassungsschutz and the illegal NSDAP. One of its agents estimated that 10% of the whole organization was his colleagues. Supposedly, the Verfassungsschutz exists to control and destroy or defeat this type of organization. In fact, they work very closely with it. Note also the elements of continuity from the immediate post-World War II period, such as the DKEG, to the present time. Another of those elements of continuity, of course, being the Nationale Europa, formed by Per Engdahl at the Malmö International. Note also that the DKEG was founded in 1953, the same year as the Naumann coup that we looked at in RFA 37, and that it was founded with a grant from the German Association of Industrial Foundations. Basically, it was funded by German industry. We're going to take a look now at an article from the September 1994 issue of the Searchlight, again the British anti-fascist publication. By way of illustrating something that we've already looked at considerable length in various broadcasts, Radio Free America 37, and our numerous conversations with Professor Wilhelm Stauffer of Stauffer Consultants, we're going to take a look at Chancellor Helmut Kohl's selection of a Nazi terrorist to represent Germany at a gathering of heart surgeons, because this individual is apparently a heart surgeon. From the September 1994 issue of the Searchlight, we find the following article called "The Chancellor and the Terrorist." It reads in part, German Chancellor Helmut Kohl commissioned a convicted international Nazi terrorist to bring Germany's greetings to an international medical conference in China at the end of May. Dr. Erhard Hartung, who works as a heart specialist at the Düsseldorf Heinrich Heine University Clinic, was sentenced in his absence to life imprisonment by a court in Florence, Italy, for his part in a bomb attack by South Tyrol Nazis at Pozzacciarta on June 25, 1967. 4 Italian soldiers were blown to bits in the attack when the terrorists detonated a remote-controlled bomb before fleeing back to Austria. Hartung and 2 other South Tyrol Nazis, Peter Kinnesberger and Egon Kufner, were convicted for the murders in 1970, a conviction which is still legally valid. Despite his involvement in murderous international terrorism as leader of the so-called Kameradschaft der ehemaligen Südtiroler Freiheitskampfer, and despite his former leading position in the now outlawed National Demokratische Partei, or NPD, Hartung was chosen by Chancellor Kohl to represent him at the first joint conference of German and Chinese heart specialists held in Wuhan, that's China, at the end of May. Kohl's office has made half-hearted denials of the terrorist accusations. However, they have been confirmed both by Hartung himself in an interview with the Norwegian daily Klassekampen and by his superior at the Düsseldorf University Clinic, Professor Dr. Hagen Dietrich Schulte. Although he practices as an anesthetist in Düsseldorf, Hartung lives in Innsbruck's exclusive Glotcherblikweg, where he leads his band of ex-terrorists and maintains close contacts with Nazi extremists. So at least one member of this illegal NSDAP, an actual convicted, albeit in absentia, Nazi terrorist, selected by Chancellor Helmut Kohl to represent Germany at a convention of heart surgeons. That's by way of illustrating the degree of favor or acceptance that the supposedly illegal Nazis in the, quote, new, unquote, Germany have gained or continue to enjoy. Again, that convicted Nazi terrorist selected by Helmut Kohl to represent Germany at an international conference of heart surgeons in China. Unfortunately, just exactly the type of underground organization and infiltration that we have seen characterizing German Nazism from the pre-Hitler period all the way on up through the contemporary period, as illustrated in that August 1994 issue of the Searchlight, is also well underway and having great effect in Austria at the present time. We should note also that the clandestine cellular organizational structure is the same one that we saw in our examination of the cagoulard structure, with which François Mitterrand was so very cozy in pre-World War II France. That subversive organization attempted to subvert France before World War II, played a role in undermining the German military resistance to Hitler in 1940, and became an integral element of the Vichy collaborationist government with which François Mitterrand was also very cozy. Returning again to the Searchlight's issue of August of 1994, we find the following article. In the Austria section, it's called Nazis on the March Again. We're going to see basically the same pattern at work here in Austria. We're going to see Nazi organizations working with the Austrian authorities and working very effectively to effect a return of Nazism to Austria. Note also something that we've looked at in the past in connection with Germany, namely the very cozy and I shouldn't say the cozy relations, although there are cozy relations between the Austrian Nazis and elements of the Austrian government, but note the degree of coincidence between the policies advocated by the Austrian Nazi parties and the policies that are being put into effect by the Austrian Interior Ministry, which, as we shall see, is not nearly as far removed from those Austrian Nazi parties as some of us might like to see. Returning again to the Searchlight of August of 1994. And again, the article is entitled Austria, Nazis on the March Again. Yet another bomb exploded in Austria on the night of June 27th. This time, the target was the building of the state court in Graz, Styria, and damage was considerable. The unknown quote-unquote perpetrators used a highly specialized electronic detonator which ignited the plastic explosive nitropenta, which is commonly used in former East Germany and Croatia. As soon as news of the bombing leaked out, the Austrian Socialist Interior Minister Frank Loschnek, L-O-S-C-H-N-A-K, rushed to deny that it had anything to do with Nazis. This is nothing new. Last December, when 10 letter bombs were sent, seriously wounding 5 people, including the mayor of Vienna, Loschnek whipped up a campaign suggesting that guest workers from former Yugoslavia were responsible. In the end, only massive media pressure brought the real bombers to light. Nazis from the Volksstreue Außerparlamentarische Opposition, or VAPO, whose leader, Gottfried Küssel, K-U-S-S-E-L, is currently in prison. There is every indication that Loschnek, creator of Austria's racist aliens laws, and praised by the, quote, yuppie fascist Jörg Haider as, quote, the best man in the government, unquote, is again playing down the Nazi threat and laying a false trail. So note, again, the degree of cooperation between Austrian officials, in this case Austrian Interior Minister Frank Loschnek, and the Nazi terrorists who are on the march again in Austria. Continuing. Interior Ministry officials are quite open about the reasons for, let me jump back to the previous sentence. There is every indication that Loschnek, creator of Austria's racist alien laws and praised by the yuppie fascist Jörg Haider as, quote, the best man in the government, unquote, is again playing down the Nazi threat and laying a false trail. Interior Ministry officials are quite open about the reasons for this. Loschnek's anti-foreigner laws, which Haider finds, quote, very satisfactory, unquote, were designed, quote, to take the wind out of the sails of right-wing extremism, unquote, combined with a modicum of state action. Thus, there can be no Nazi attacks because the Nazis' main demands have already been met or because the Nazis are all in prison. Recall in Germany, we saw how the CDU-CSU of Helmut Kohl basically adopt the very policies towards immigration that the Nazi parties, the supposedly disconnected but in fact altogether unified Nazi parties, had espoused. Continuing. That the Austrian government's continual retreats before the racists and fascists are understood as an encouragement to right-wing extremism does not appear to enter into the reckoning of the police and Interior Ministry. As a result, Austria, presented to the outside world as an island of bliss, stands at the forefront of European fascism. For example, Haider's Freiheitliche Partei Österreichs, or FPO, currently stands at 20% in national opinion polls. In the traditional Nazi stronghold of Carinthia, it would win 33%. In Vienna, 30%, and in many smaller districts as much as 40%. In some units in the Vienna police, the FPO pockets the votes of 80% of the personnel. One more time, because this is a truly scary figure, and we have dealt with Nazi infiltration of the Vienna police in the past. In some units, resuming again with the Searchlight's account from August of 1994, in some units in the Vienna police, the FPO pockets the votes of 80% of the personnel. These are figures of which the German Fascist Republikaner and even the Italian MSI could only dream. Skipping down, nowhere else in Europe, not even in Germany, is there such a broad and interlinked structure of fascist and ultranationalist, quote, cultural associations, unquote, quote, gymnastics leagues, unquote, quote, small parties, unquote, and, quote, veterans organizations, unquote. The German nationalist and unequivocally right-wing extremist Austrian Gymnastics Association has more than 70,000 members, Haider's party more than 40,000, and the revanchist veterans organization, the Austrian Comrades League, over 300,000. The new president of the Comrades League, Felix Ermacora, E-R-M-A-C-O-R-A, a former Christian Democrat, OVP, MP, and United Nations human rights expert, wrote recently in a letter about the, quote, trail of blood, unquote, that the wartime Allies had left across Austria and the German Reich during the liberation in 1945. This outburst was the result of anti-fascist protests against Comrades League's plans to erect a monument in Stalingrad, quote, for the fallen German and Austrian heroes, unquote. This disgraceful scheme, which even the German veterans groups do not support, has been backed to the tune of £1.2 million by the Austrian government and socialist-ruled Vienna. One more time, because this is a beaut. And this is a plan, basically, by Austrian Third Reich combat veterans, an Austrian Third Reich combat veterans organization, to build a monument at Stalingrad for the Third Reich's, quote, fallen heroes, unquote. This last sentence, again, the outburst of the head of the Comrades League was sparked by, quote, this outburst was the result of anti-fascist protests against Comrades League's plans to erect a monument in Stalingrad, quote, for the fallen German and Austrian heroes, unquote. This disgraceful scheme, which even the German veterans groups do not support, has been backed to the tune of £1.2 million by the Austrian government and socialist-ruled Vienna. The veterans organization includes openly Nazi groupings like the notorious Edelweiss, which extols Himmler's criminal Waffen-SS as an example. Many Edelweiss members are professional officers in the Austrian military who deny German war guilt and claim that Austrians were the, quote, best SS soldiers, unquote. Again, note the pattern of cooperation between officialdom and the supposedly illegal Nazi organizations. Continuing. The president of Edelweiss, Lieutenant Colonel Josef Puntigam, P-U-N-T-I-G-A-M, who commands an army regiment in Stras in Styria, has openly proclaimed his Nazi sympathies. He has even written in an official Austrian army publication that Hitler's war of extermination was, quote, a heroic war of defense against world Jewry and Bolshevism, unquote. Not surprisingly, Puntigam's name figures in Nazi address books as a sympathizer. The president of the Austrian Civil Servants Union, Siegfried Dohr, is also a functionary of Edelweiss. Dohr came to public attention last year when he made an openly anti-Semitic statement, quote, we trade unionists need no Jewish wheeling and dealing, unquote, on television. The Austrian trade union leadership made no protests. And skipping down, about an Austrian Nazi terror campaign directed at the city, centered to a large extent in the city of Graz, where not coincidentally, many of the Austrian Nazi leaders were imprisoned. The Searchlight reads as follows. The latest outrage in Graz, that's G-R-A-Z, bears all the hallmarks of a continued campaign to bring about destabilization. As if to exploit this, Haider's FPO has already started its campaign for the October 1994 elections under the strident slogan, quote, "We shall create order," unquote. All the signs of a Nazi terror campaign are to be found in the Graz bombing. The explosive material and detonators used point clearly to the Nazis, at least 30 of whom have served in the Croatian fascist HOS militia and have brought back weapons, bomb-making materials, and terrorist know-how to Austria. Note, as we saw earlier, the Pope's trip to, quote, independent, unquote, Croatia, which to a large extent has recapitulated the Ustashi fascist dictatorship, and note the Pope's visit where he basically extolled the Ustashi parliamentarian, Archbishop Stepanak. In the past, on One Step Beyond, we have dealt with the sending by Austrian and German Nazis of mercenaries to fight alongside of the Croatian fascists. Continuing, or resuming again with this sentence, the explosive material and detonators used point clearly to the Nazis, at least 30 of whom have served in the Croatian fascist HOS militia and have brought back weapons, bomb-making materials, and terrorist know-how to Austria. A similar detonator was used in Austria in the early 1980s when the German Nazi terrorist Eckhard Weil, W-E-I-L, helped by the entire Austrian Nazi scene, carried out 11 bombings on Jewish targets and personalities, including Simon Wiesenthal. Courtroom 7 of the Graz court, which was bombed, was the scene of several recent trials of Austrian Nazis, including Herbert Schweiger, S-C-H-W-E-I-G-E-R, a former Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler SS man, key figure in the German-Austrian Nazi network, and training boss of the outlawed German Nationalistische Front. The young Nazi rising star Franz Radl, R-A-D-L, was convicted for Holocaust denial in the same court. Radl, who spent 4 months of 1993 in prison, is chief of the Austrian Anti-Antifa and was arrested in December of last year on suspicion of having masterminded the letter bomb campaign. Interrupting briefly, recall in our discussions with Professor Wilhelm Stauffer, we saw how the German government itself was actually offering protection for the perpetrators of this letter bomb campaign in Austria. Continuing. Beginning again with this paragraph, the young Nazi rising star Franz Radl was convicted for Holocaust denial in the same court. Radl, who spent 4 months of 1993 in prison, is chief of the Austrian Anti-Antifa and was arrested in December of last year on suspicion of having masterminded the letter bomb campaign. Radl wrote to Kusel from his cell in Graz, emphasizing the need, quote, to build a conspiratorial cadre structure and to strike back, unquote, at opponents with, quote, merciless retaliation, unquote. Coincidentally, another top Austrian Nazi is incarcerated in Graz's other prison, a mere 500 meters away from the scene of the latest bombing. Walter Ockensberger, publisher of Sieg and a pathological Jew-hater, has sent anti-Semitic letters from prison to other Nazis, including the German-Canadian Holocaust denier Ernst Zundel, who distributes the statement worldwide. The Austrian police, quote, are looking into the matter, unquote. These are not the only clues to indicate the expansion of the Austrian Nazi scene. Even Loschnacht's police officials have had to concede that the fascist movement has grown massively in Upper Austria and Carinthia. Recent events in the Carinthian city of Klagenfurt provide a glimpse into the strength of Austrian fascism. Two Nationalistische Front Nazis, Helmut Adolf Schatzmeier and Andreas Thierry, were charged with distributing leaflets headed, quote, the truth about the Waffen-SS, unquote. With them in court to give, quote, moral support, unquote, were more than 100 other Nazis. When the court decision was announced and the two were sentenced to a year each in prison, the mob broke into frenzied chants of Heil Hitler. Among those bawling the loudest was Schatzmeier's father, a teacher who was acquitted of Holocaust denial last year, despite the evidence of dozens of his pupils that he had praised the Hitler regime and had denied the existence of gas chambers. The Carinthian government has avoided taking any action to bring Schatzmeier to justice following his latest court performance. So note that the pattern that we looked at in Germany a short time ago from the August 1994 searchlight is also evident in Austria as well. We have seen the very powerful Austrian organizations which have infiltrated Austrian society and which are, frankly, condoned to a considerable extent by elements of Austrian officialdom. Note, too, elements of continuity between the fascism of the past and the fascism of the present. Note people from, for example, the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, one of the Austrian Nazis described above, that individual's name, Herbert Schweiger. We took a look also at previously in the discussion of the illegal German NSDAP, March Separately, Strike Together, at the role of Wilhelm Goebbels, one of the organizers, along with Verfassungsschutz agent Werner Gottwald, of the illegal NSDAP. He also was a member of the Waffen-SS Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. Note also the sending of mercenaries to fight in Croatia and South Africa, and note how those mercenaries have then returned home to perpetrate terror campaigns in their native countries. The pattern that we have seen in Germany is the same pattern that is basically manifesting itself in Austria, and it is the same basic organizational methodology that was espoused or conceived of by Adolf Hitler and described by Joseph Gollum in 1939. We are seeing it now in Germany and Austria in 1994. But once again, the address for the Searchlight, a very valuable publication and one that people should subscribe to.
To subscribe to the Searchlight, a British anti-fascist publication, write to Searchlight Magazine Limited, 37B, New Cavendish Street, London, W1M8JR, or phone 011-4471-284-4040, or fax 011-4471-284-4410. That's the Searchlight Magazine Limited, 37B, New Cavendish Street, London, W1M8JR, phone 011-4471-284-4040, or fax at 011-4471-284-4410.
Also, by the way, for the benefit of listeners who would like to obtain some of the publications that actually do report on the reality of international fascism, one of the publications that I strongly recommend, unfortunately has not been coming out as frequently recently as it had, and that is the magnificent Germany Alert newsletter. The address, etc., for Germany Alert, and I also strongly recommend that listeners to this program subscribe to Germany Alert. Germany Alert can be reached at and through, they're at 244 Madison Avenue, Suite 191, New York, 10016. That address once again, 244 Madison Avenue, Suite 191, New York, 10016. The fax number is 800-709-9498. Once again, the fax number for Germany Alert, 800-709-9458. Their email is 100265, that might be a dot, 3013. That's through CompuServe. Once again, email 100265 dot or comma 3013, CompuServe. That for the Germany Alert newsletter. We have been looking at underground fascist cellular organizations, and again, the deliberate attempt at organizing in such a way as to escape notice is one of the reasons why Johnny can't identify Il Duce. Note again the elements of historical continuity from the fascism of the 30s and 40s to the present. Publications like Nation und Europa, founded by Swedish fascist Per Engdahl, himself very close to the MSI, the Movimento Sociale Italiano, the Italian Fascist Party, which gave rise to the National Alliance, that a central element in the right-wing fascist alliance of P2 member Silvio Berlusconi, which currently governs Italy. The P2 Lodge itself, exemplary of the clandestine cellular organization that fascism has utilized so successfully, the same pattern that we saw with the Cagoulard in France of the 1930s, with which François Mitterrand was very cozy, the same pattern which we saw in RFA 37, the German Nazis putting into effect during the closing years of World War II, the same pattern that we saw the German Nazis using effectively in the post-World War II period in the, quote, new, unquote, Germany, the same pattern that we have just seen in the August 1994 issue of the Spotlight, both in Germany with the illegal NSDAP and in Austria. It is the methodology of fascism to organize in clandestine cells and to deliberately escape notice until the time comes for the two armies, the overground army and the underground army, to strike together. We're going to take a look now at some things going on here in the United States. Specifically, we're going to take a look at a very disturbing charge that has surfaced in connection with the O.J. Simpson murder trial. Reading now from the San Francisco Chronicle of Thursday, July 21st of 1994. This is a Chronicle Wire Services story, dateline Los Angeles, and headlined, O.J. offers $500,000 for, quote, real killer, unquote. Subheaded, Simpson defense prepares to do its own investigation. This concerns allegations that have been made by the Simpson defense team against Los Angeles Police Detective Mark Fuhrman. They have been hotly denied by Fuhrman and his counsel. The O.J. Simpson, sources close to the Simpson defense team have leaked their contention that Mark Fuhrman found a bloody glove, found actually a pair of bloody gloves at the murder scene, where the scene where the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were found, and that he took one of the gloves to the mansion where O.J. Simpson lived and dropped it behind the guest house where Cato Kalin lived. Obviously, those allegations have not been proven. They have been hotly denied by Mark Fuhrman and his counsel. What is interesting concerns allegations that Mark Fuhrman is not only a racist, but a member of a group within the LAPD that is basically a Nazi cell, an Aryan Nations cell. There have been numerous reports of Mark Fuhrman's alleged racism. It has not been conclusively proved. It remains to be seen what comes out in the trial. By the way, due to the limitations of time, I'm not going to be able to discuss the O.J. Simpson murder trial at anywhere near the length or in the detail that I would like. Suffice it to say that I think there is very significant evidence that O.J. Simpson did not, in fact, commit that murder. There is also very significant evidence that perhaps he was not only set up, but that this may in fact involve a covert operation of sorts. It may be an organized crime setup, if in fact it's a setup. I think there are also some very disturbing indications that this may be a political event coming from the highest rungs of the American power and national security structures. It remains to be seen whether that is in fact the case, but we will examine that in future discussions. In particular, there is an upcoming miscellaneous archive show that will be entitled L.A. Flawed, and we're going to examine not only the O.J. Simpson murder case, but the Menendez case as well. The Menendez case has occurred in a very significant organized crime and national security context. That and the O.J. Simpson case will be discussed in an upcoming broadcast. Skipping down, in the San Francisco Chronicle article of 7/21/94, we read, Private investigator Zvonko Bill Pavelic, P-A-V-E-L-I-C, a former police officer, said he is obtaining a lot of information about Fuhrman, quote, from inside the LAPD, unquote, that will be used to discredit him in court. Again, quoting, with Mr. Mark Fuhrman, the one common denominator is he is well perceived to be a racist and a pathological liar, unquote, Pavelic said. Court documents obtained by reporters show that in 1983, Fuhrman told psychiatrists that his job had turned him into a racist, quote, wild man, unquote, who beat and harassed people for the thrill of it. He made this assertion in connection with his unsuccessful bid for a disability pension. A source close to police told the Associated Press that Fuhrman was the leader of a group of officers called Men Against Women, or MAW. Police Lieutenant John Duncan confirmed that several internal investigations had targeted a group by that name based in the West Los Angeles station where Furman works, but declined to say if Furman was involved. Note again that there has been an internal LAPD investigation of this Men Against Women group in MAW. Repeating that last paragraph, a source close to police told the Associated Press that Furman was the leader of a group of officers called Men Against Women, or MAW. Police Lieutenant John Duncan confirmed that several internal investigations had targeted a group by that name based in the West Los Angeles station where Furman works, but declined to say if Furman was involved. A source close to the Simpson defense told the Associated Press that according to the defense team's investigation, MAW was, quote, basically a white Aryan Brotherhood fraternal police organization that is basically anti-female, unquote. Remains to be seen what, if anything, comes of these allegations, but we should note for the record that it is a matter of public record that there has been significant infiltration of the LAPD by various right-wing groups, ranging from the John Birch Society, whose national head John Rousselot stated in 1968 that 2,000 members of the LAPD and LA County Sheriff's Department were dues-paying members of the John Birch Society, all the way on up through more extreme groups such as Western Goals and explicitly Nazi groups such as the Viking Group, which came to light a couple of years ago. So note not only that there's been an LAPD internal investigation of the MAW group, or Men Against Women group, but note here the allegation made by someone close to the Simpson defense team that MAW is, quote, basically a white Aryan Brotherhood fraternal police organization that is basically anti-female. We've also seen in the past collaboration between elements of LAPD and the national security establishment in such contexts as the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, and quite possibly, let's say the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, the COINTELPRO program, the provocations of the criminal conspiracy section of the LAPD, right on up through the Western Goals spy scandal of the early 1980s. More about the allegations of racism that have surfaced against Mark Furman. This from the San Francisco Chronicle of Friday, August 19th of 1994. An article by William Carlson, C-A-R-L-S-E-N, of the Chronicle. This is Dateline Los Angeles and headlined, Simpson's defense accuses investigating officer of bias. The article reads, in part, skipping down, arguing that Furman's records are relevant, the defense cited an August 16th declaration by a woman named Kathleen Bell. Bell stated in the affidavit that while working as a Redondo Beach real estate agent in 1985 or 1986, she was present at a Marine Corps recruiting station when Furman said he routinely made up reasons to pull over any auto occupied by a black man and a white woman, and indicated he was disgusted by seeing blacks and whites together. Bell quoted Furman as saying, quote, if I had my way, they would take all the niggers, put them together in a big group, and burn them, unquote. The defense also cited a 1991 lawsuit against the police that alleges Furman participated in a scheme with other officers to plant a weapon near a black suspect to justify the man's shooting. The man was shot 6 times and survived. Although his lawsuit did not identify his alleged police attacker, Simpson's defense team contends it was Furman. Quote, the details of that internal affairs investigation, as well as other similar incidents since 1989 in which Furman or the other detectives may have been involved, are relevant to Mr. Simpson's effort to provide a possible explanation for the presence of the glove on his property, unquote, the defense motion said. The defense also included nearly 100 pages of psychiatric reports and other documents concerning Furman's 1981 bid for a disability pension, in which Furman is quoted as saying that he was, quote, uncontrollably, unquote, violent, and is reported to have made racist statements. Those documents, which were reported earlier by the news media, show that the city rejected Furman's claim on the ground that he was lying about his mental state to collect an early retirement from the force. And to note again that there are allegations surfacing both from the internal LAPD investigation and from sources close to the Simpson defense team that Furman was a member of a Nazi cell within the LAPD. if those allegations are correct. Well, whether or not the allegations are correct, we should note that there is, as a matter of public record, a history of not extreme right-wing and explicitly Nazi organization within elements of the LAPD, not unlike the Nazi cellular organization that we have seen in so many other contexts throughout history during the course of the discussion this evening. The Vienna police, as we saw in the August 1994 Searchlight article, manifesting a similar pattern. The attempts by the O.J. Simpson defense team to obtain the personnel records of Mark Fuhrman, the LAPD records as well as his military records, have been turned down. San Francisco Examiner article, of Thursday, 9/1/94 reads as follows. This is an article by Linda Deutsch of the Associated Press. It's dateline Los Angeles and headlined, O.J. team denied access to cops' personnel record. Subheaded, Judge also considers gag order in case. O.J. Simpson's challenge to the credibility of a key investigator suffered another setback Wednesday when a judge denied a defense request to search the detective's personnel file for signs of racism. Superior Court Judge Lance Ito's ruling, along with a previous one denying the defense access to the detective Mark Fuhrman's military records, limits Simpson's efforts to interject race into the case. Skipping down, as the hearing got underway, Ito squelched a defense effort to pore through police personnel records of Fuhrman, who is white, in search of evidence that the officer is a racist liar who could have planted evidence to incriminate Simpson, who is black. I would note, too, and we're going to get into this in a much bigger way when we have time, when I do the archive show about the O.J. Simpson murder case, if in fact Mark Fuhrman was involved in some way in planting evidence against O.J. Simpson, I personally doubt that he would have done this on his own. I think that if Fuhrman was, as alleged, involved in planting evidence on O.J. Simpson, he would have done so as part of an organization and at the direction of superiors. One of the many questions I have about the O.J. Simpson murder case is the possibility of a deliberately blown defense, as we have seen in previous national security-connected cases, and I suspect that there is at least a possibility that the O.J. Simpson case may be such a case. One of the things that I find frankly incredible is that O.J. Simpson's defense team did not challenge Judge Ito as being the judge to hear the case, because Judge Ito appears to me, frankly, to have a profound conflict of interest. As we have seen, the legal debate in the O.J. Simpson case is going to turn to a considerable extent around allegations of police misconduct, deliberate police misconduct of a felonious nature. And obviously there are allegations of not only racism on the part of Mark Fuhrman, but of Nazi affiliations on the part of Mark Fuhrman. The investigation into the veracity of those allegations will obviously be impeded by the judge's decision, Judge Ito's decision, not to grant the Simpson defense team access to Mark Fuhrman's police and military records. One of the things that I find frankly incredible is that not incredible, but shocking, that the O.J. Simpson defense team did not challenge Judge Ito and demand a different judge. The reason for that is exemplified in the San Francisco Chronicle of Saturday, July 23rd of 1994. This is an article by William Carlson, again, C-A-R-L-S-E-N, of the Chronicle, dateline L.A., headlined, O.J. plea, 100% not guilty. Skipping down, about Judge Ito, we find, pointing out that Ito is married to a Los Angeles police captain in the Bunko forgery unit, Mills asked both sides whether they had any objection to Ito serving as trial judge. Both Robert Shapiro, Simpson's lead counsel, and prosecutor Marcia Clark answered that they found Ito, quote, acceptable, unquote. And skipping down, in a recent interview with a local legal newspaper, Ito said that he met his wife, Captain Margaret York, quote, at a homicide scene looking over a dead body, unquote. York, then a homicide detective, is now the highest-ranking woman in the department. Well, again, in a case where allegations of deliberate and felonious police misconduct are going to be central to the legal debate, having a judge married to the highest-ranking female member of the Los Angeles Police Department appears to me to be a conflict of interest, if ever there was one. Another thing I find very strange about the O.J. Simpson case concerns the bungling, if in fact that's what it is, by the coroner's department. We will get into this at greater length when I do the archive show about the O.J. Simpson murder case, but note the following from the Chronicle, the San Francisco Chronicle of Monday, August 8th of 1994. AP story, Dateline Los Angeles, headlined, Defense Pursues Ice Cream Clue in Simpson Case. It reads in part, Nicole Brown Simpson, her 2 children, and a young man in a suit stopped in for ice cream the night she and Ron Goldman were killed, the manager of a Ben & Jerry's said yesterday. Bill Chang said he did not believe the man was Goldman. Skipping down, prosecutors have said Nicole Simpson and Goldman were killed between 10:15 p.m. and 11 p.m. on June 12th. But police found a cup of ice cream, much of it still frozen, near the bodies sometime after 12:10 a.m. on June 13th, the sources told the magazine. The timing of the discovery would suggest that Simpson and Goldman were alive after 11 p.m. because the ice cream would have melted in the 60-degree heat, the magazine reported. Now note the following from the San Francisco Examiner of Thursday, July 21st of 1994. Article by Michael Fleeman, FLWMAN of the AP, also Dateline Los Angeles, headline, Coroner, Simpson evidence handled poorly. It reads in part, the coroner's office has identified 16 instances of mishandled evidence in the O.J. Simpson case, which sources say include a bile sample labeled as urine and the possibility that Nicole Brown Simpson's bloody dress was contaminated by dangling in a communal drip pan. Skipping down, according to interviews with coroner's employees, the problems include leaving the bodies of Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman in unmarked crypts, improperly removing and storing the victim's personal belongings, and sending a less experienced morgue worker to pick up the bodies at the crime scene. Skipping down, Deputy Medical Examiner Erwin Goldwyn said Nicole Simpson's stomach contents had been discarded, while Goldman's had inexplicably been saved. Goldman admitted he hadn't adequately investigated whether a knife such as one Simpson allegedly bought could have created the fatal wounds. Under cross-examination by defense attorney Robert Shapiro, Golden further revealed that coroner's investigators hadn't even seen the bodies for more than 10 hours after they were discovered, and that the lapse precluded determining either a precise time of death or who died first. A victim's time of death is most accurately determined by the drop in normal body temperature. I would also note that among the factors to determine the time of death are the gastric contents of the victim, because that determines, obviously, the degree of digestion also helps to determine the time of death. Well, the fact that the bodies were not examined until 10 hours after the murder is strange. The discarding of the contents of Nicole Simpson's stomach, in light of the critical nature of the ice cream evidence, for lack of a better term, is also, frankly, to my way of thinking, very, very, very suspicious. Again, there's an old saying in the clandestine services, give us the coroner, we'll control the city. I have a healthy respect for human stupidity and incompetence. However, I really wonder whether all of those mistakes, quote-unquote, including failing to examine the bodies for 10 hours. By the way, the coroner's office blames the delay on the police and the discarding of Nicole Simpson's stomach. I wonder if that's really coincidence. Last item I'm going to touch on, and bear in mind that the bodies of Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ron Goldman were kept in unlocked crypts. And again, there are allegations of deliberate police misconduct. They have yet to be proved, as I've said before. From the San Francisco Chronicle of Friday, July 1st of 1994, the following article, also by William Carlson of the Chronicle, Dateline Los Angeles, headline, Dramatic Early Testimony, subheaded, Witness says he sold knife to Simpson. Skipping down, autopsy reports indicate that Nicole Brown Simpson and Goldman were savagely slashed to death outside her condominium. Knife store salesman Jose Camacho testified that 2 days after the killings, Los Angeles police detectives came to the downtown store where he works and purchased a single-edged retractable knife nearly identical to the knife he sold to the former football star. Why did they do that? Last article, and I wonder whether perhaps there is an attempt to set up O.J. Simpson, and this is by no way a statement I'm making, but rather a question I'm asking. Note that the bodies of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson were kept in unlocked crypts. They were accessible to those who would want to plant evidence. That's all we have time for this evening. We're going to finish up the last couple of items that had been intended for tonight's broadcast next week. So that concludes the One Step Beyond broadcast for this evening, and it has been a long evening. My name is Dave Emory. Thanks for listening, and good night. Now, all of our archive broadcast shows are on permanent file with the Tape Duplication Company. The name of that company is Archives on Audio. That's Archives on Audio. They're located at P.O. Box 170023, San Francisco, California, 94117. The phone number is area code 415-346-1840. 415-346-1840. I should also mention that neither myself nor the station makes any money off of this announcement. This is FYI. This is Dave Emory thanking all the listeners for their contributions and encouraging them to tune in again to the next broadcast. Until then, take care.